The investigation began not with a crime scene, but with a digital silence. For Clara Bennett, a 28-year-old whose life was a meticulously curated chronicle of gentle joys, silence was the most alarming sound she could make. Her followers, accustomed to daily updates about artisanal coffee, urban gardening, and the hidden art of port blossom, noticed her absence first. It started on a Tuesday. Her morning post, usually a sun-drenched photo of her cat, Apollo, never appeared. By afternoon, the comments on her previous day's post shifted from cheerful engagement to mild concern. By Wednesday evening, that concern had curdled into a genuine, spreading fear that reached out from the screen and into the physical world. Clara's younger sister, Maya, was the one who made the official call. She had tried Clara's phone repeatedly, the calls going straight to voicemail after a single, hollow ring. She had driven to her sister's charming but modest apartment, finding the door locked, the windows dark, and a day's worth of mail peeking from the slot. When officers from the Port Blossom Police Department conducted a welfare check, they found an apartment that was unnervingly pristine. The bed was made, the dishes were clean, and Apollo was patiently waiting by his food bowl, the only sign of distress in an otherwise calm environment. There was no sign of a struggle, no forced entry, and nothing appeared to be missing except for Clara herself, her phone, her wallet, and her keys. Clara Bennett was, by all accounts, a creature of habit and kindness. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, a job that afforded her the flexibility to pursue her true passion, her blog, Port Blossom in Bloom. It was a love letter to her city, a digital space where she celebrated small businesses, interviewed local artists, and found beauty in overlooked corners. Her content was a reflection of her personality. Bright, optimistic, and deeply sincere. She had built a community of over 50,000 followers who were drawn to her genuine enthusiasm. Clara was not an influencer in the modern, commercialized sense. She was a documentarian of small wonders, and her audience felt less like fans and more like friends she was showing around her neighborhood. This online persona was not a fabrication. Friends and family described her in identical terms. She was the person who remembered birthdays, who brought soup when you were sick, who championed the dreams of others as fiercely as her own. She was responsible, she was grounded, and she was not the type of person to disappear without a word. Detectives began their work by mapping the last known hours of her life, a task made both easier and more complex by her digital footprint. Her final post, published on Monday afternoon, was a simple, cheerful picture of a small, handcrafted ceramic bird she had purchased at a local weekend market. The caption read, "New friend for my windowsill. #local art. #port blossom." The photograph was typical Clara, well lit, aesthetically pleasing, and focused on a detail of simple beauty. It garnered hundreds of likes and comments within the first hour. Investigators saw it as the last confirmed sign of her normal life, a digital timestamp marking the moment before everything went wrong. What more could a picture of a ceramic bird really tell them? Her digital records confirmed a timeline that ended abruptly. Her phone's location data showed her at the market on Sunday, at a coffee shop Monday morning, and then back at her apartment for the rest of Monday afternoon. The last ping from her phone was near her apartment building, around 9 p.m. on Monday night. After that, the device was either turned off or its battery had died. Financial records corroborated this timeline. Her credit card was used to buy the ceramic bird at the market and a latte at the coffee shop. There was no further activity. Her bank accounts remained untouched. This lack of financial movement was a grim indicator. It suggested she had not run away, as there were no resources being accessed to fund a new life. The initial phase of the investigation focused on the people closest to her. Detectives Miles Corbin and his partner, Detective Ana Ruiz, were assigned the case. They were seasoned investigators who understood that in cases like this, the answer usually lay within the victim's inner circle. They started with Clara's family, who were distraught and completely baffled. Clara's parents described her as happy and stable. She had recently landed a major freelance contract that was set to secure her financially for the next year. She was excited about the future, making plans to expand her blog and perhaps even write a book. They insisted she had no enemies, no dark secrets, no reason to vanish. Her sister Maya, though overwhelmed with grief and fear, provided a more nuanced picture. She confirmed Clara's general happiness, but mentioned a recent breakup. The relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Mark Renshaw, had ended about 2 months prior. Maya described the split as messy, but not, she thought, dangerous. This lead immediately shifted the focus of the investigation. Mark Renshaw became person of interest number 1. He was a musician in a local band, and according to Maya, he had been intensely jealous of the time and attention Clara dedicated to her blog. He had often belittled her passion, calling it a silly online hobby. When detectives Corbin and Ruiz brought Mark in for questioning, he was defensive and agitated. He admitted the breakup had been difficult and that he had been heartbroken. He conceded that he had sent Clara a series of angry and pleading text messages in the weeks following their split, messages he now deeply regretted. Mark claimed he had not seen or spoken to Clara in over a month. He told investigators he had been trying to move on with his life. When asked for his whereabouts on the Monday, Clara disappeared. His story became vague. He said he was at home, alone, writing music. It was the kind of alibi that was impossible to verify and immediately raised suspicion. The detectives pressed him. They pointed out the possessive nature of his texts and the clear anger they contained. Mark grew flustered, insisting his words were just the ramblings of a man in pain, not the threats of a violent person. He swore he would never hurt Clara, that he still loved her despite everything. While the interview with Mark was underway, forensics teams conducted a thorough search of Clara's apartment. They were looking for any trace of a struggle, any misplaced DNA, any clue that pointed to what had happened. They used luminol to check for traces of blood, but the apartment was clean. It was as if she had simply evaporated. Her laptop was a potential treasure trove of information. Digital forensics experts began creating a mirror image of her hard drive to analyze her emails, messages, and browser history. They hoped to find a hidden conversation, a secret fear, or a new person in her life that her family did not know about. The analysis of her digital life revealed a woman who was exactly as she appeared. Her emails were mostly work-related or correspondence with local artists she planned to feature. Her direct messages on social media were overwhelmingly positive, filled with encouragement from her followers and friendly chats with other bloggers. There was no sign of a stalker, no threatening messages, no secret online relationship. The only negativity came from Mark Renshaw. His messages, retrieved from her social media accounts, painted a portrait of a man struggling with rejection. He accused her of choosing her fake online friends over him and begged her for another chance. The final message he sent, a week before her disappearance, simply said, "You'll regret throwing us away." This message, combined with his weak alibi, solidified Mark's position as the primary suspect. The Port Blossom Police Department dedicated significant resources to investigating him. They subpoenaed his phone records, which showed his phone was in the general vicinity of his own apartment on Monday night. But the cell tower data was too broad to rule out a quick trip to Clara's neighborhood. Detectives interviewed Mark's bandmates and friends. Most described him as moody and prone to jealousy, but were shocked at the suggestion he could be violent. One bandmate, however, reluctantly admitted that Mark had been drinking heavily since the breakup and had made several bitter comments about Clara's success, once remarking that he wished her blog would just disappear. The circumstantial evidence was piling up. A search warrant was executed for Mark's apartment and vehicle. Investigators were looking for any trace of Clara, a strand of hair, a fiber from her clothing, or any cleaning supplies that might suggest a cleanup. They were also looking for her missing belongings, particularly her phone. The search yielded nothing conclusive. Mark's apartment was cluttered and messy, but there was no forensic evidence linking him to Clara's disappearance. Her phone was not there. There were no signs of a struggle or a cleanup. The case against him remained entirely circumstantial, resting on his motive and his inability to provide a concrete alibi. Meanwhile, the public search for Clara intensified. Her face was on the local news and on flyers posted across the city. Her followers organized online campaigns, using hashtags and sharing her picture in the hope that someone might have seen something. The community she had so lovingly built was now rallying to find her, their collective grief a testament to the impact she had made. Days turned into a week, and the week turned into a month. The investigation into Mark Renshaw continued, but without new evidence, it began to stagnate. He maintained his innocence, and his lawyer advised him to stop speaking with the police. The narrative in the media became fixed. A jealous ex-boyfriend was the likely culprit, but the police lacked the evidence to make an arrest. This narrative brought a different kind of trouble. Mark became a pariah in the community. His band kicked him out. He was fired from his part-time job at a music store, and he received threats online and in person. He was being tried in the court of public opinion, and the verdict was guilty. Detective Corbin, however, was not entirely convinced. While Mark was a compelling suspect, Corbin's gut told him something was off. The pristine condition of Clara's apartment felt wrong. It suggested either a planned abduction by a stranger or that Clara had left willingly with someone she knew and trusted, someone who would not have needed to force their way in. Corbin and Ruiz decided to take a step back and re-examine the periphery of Clara's life. They began interviewing her neighbors, her colleagues, and the other artists and business owners she had featured on her blog. They were looking for anyone who might have developed an unhealthy fixation on her, anyone who might have been lurking in the background. One neighbor stood out, but for reasons of helpfulness rather than suspicion. Julian Croft lived in the apartment directly across the hall from Clara. He was a quiet, unassuming man in his early 30s who worked in information technology. He had been one of the first people to speak with police on the night of the welfare check. Julian had told the initial responding officers that he had seen Clara on Monday evening. He said she seemed normal, and they had exchanged a brief, friendly hello in the hallway. He had been cooperative and expressed deep concern for her safety. He even offered to help with the search, printing flyers at his own expense. In a follow-up interview, Julian provided more details to Detectives Corbin and Ruiz. He described Clara as a wonderful neighbor, always cheerful and polite. He mentioned that he had helped her with her computer on a few occasions, and that they had a friendly, neighborly relationship. He seemed genuinely eager to assist the investigation in any way he could. He also offered a piece of information that seemed to further implicate Mark Renshaw. Julian claimed to have heard raised voices coming from Clara's apartment a few weeks before she disappeared. He said he could not make out the words, but was certain he recognized Mark's voice from the times he had visited. He said the argument sounded heated. This statement strengthened the police's theory about Mark, but it did nothing to provide the physical evidence they needed. The investigation was stuck in a frustrating limbo. They had a prime suspect with a motive and a weak alibi, but no body, no weapon, and no crime scene. As months passed, the case slowly went cold. The media attention faded, the public search efforts dwindled, and the detectives were assigned to more pressing, active cases. For Clara's family, the lack of answers was a constant, gnawing agony. They were trapped between hope and despair, unable to mourn and unable to move forward. The only thing that remained active was Clara's blog and her social media pages. They became a digital memorial, a place where friends and strangers alike would leave comments, sharing memories of her, or simply expressing their sorrow. Her final post, the picture of the ceramic bird, was now a heartbreaking symbol of a life cut short. Mark Renshaw, for his part, left Port Blossom. Unable to rebuild his life under the cloud of suspicion, he moved to a different state to start over. His departure was seen by many as an admission of guilt, but for the police, it simply meant their only suspect was now hundreds of miles away. The case file on Clara Bennett was officially moved to the cold case unit. 2 years passed. The world moved on, as it always does. New stories dominated the headlines, and the memory of the missing blogger faded from the public consciousness. But for Maya and her parents, the pain was as fresh as ever. And for Detective Miles Corbin, the case was a persistent, unwelcome ghost in the back of his mind. Corbin had since been promoted, but he never forgot the unsettling tidiness of Clara's apartment, or the nagging feeling that they had missed something. He would occasionally pull the file, rereading the interviews, staring at the photos, hoping a new perspective might reveal a hidden clue. He kept coming back to that last post. The ceramic bird on the windowsill. It felt like the period at the end of her life story, but the sentence made no sense. The breakthrough, when it finally came, was not the result of a dramatic confession or a newly discovered body. It was the product of a fresh set of eyes and a leap in technology. A new detective, a young tech-savvy woman named Sarah Jenkins, was assigned to the cold case unit. Her task was to review old cases to see if new forensic techniques could be applied. When Jenkins opened the Clara Bennett file, she was immediately drawn to the digital evidence, or lack thereof. She was struck by how a woman who lived her life so publicly could vanish without leaving a single digital trace after 9 p.m. on a Monday. It was the sudden, absolute cutoff that she found suspicious. She focused on the final social media post. The police report contained a standard, low-resolution screenshot of the photo from Clara's page. Jenkins wondered if the original high-resolution file was still available. Social media companies often compress images for display, but they store the original uploaded file on their servers. It was a long shot, but Jenkins drafted a new warrant. She requested the original full-resolution image file for Clara's last post, along with all associated metadata. The legal process was slow, but after several weeks, the tech company complied. They sent over a data package containing the file Jenkins had requested. When she opened the image file on her high-definition monitor, it was much clearer and more detailed than the screenshot in the case file. It was a beautiful photo, just as everyone had described. But Jenkins was not looking at the composition. She was looking for details. She zoomed in, pushing the resolution to its limit. She focused on the ceramic bird itself. It was coated in a smooth, glossy glaze. As she magnified the image, she noticed something faint, something distorted in the reflection on the bird's curved surface. It was blurry and warped, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. But it was there. Jenkins took the image file to the department's digital forensics lab. She showed them the faint reflection and asked if it was possible to de-warp it, to reconstruct the image. The lab technicians were skeptical. The reflection was tiny and severely distorted. But they had new software, advanced algorithms designed for precisely this kind of complex image analysis. They went to work. The process was painstaking, involving hours of digital manipulation. They isolated the reflection and fed it into the software, which attempted to reverse the distortion caused by the bird's curved surface. Slowly, painstakingly, a new image began to emerge from the digital noise. It was a face, a man's face, holding a smartphone. He was wearing glasses, and his expression was neutral, focused. His features were still slightly blurred, but it was clear enough to be recognizable. and it was most certainly not Clara Bennett. Detective Jenkins pulled up the photos from the original case file. She compared the reconstructed face from the reflection to the interview photos of the key players. It was not Mark Renshaw. She then pulled up the photo of the helpful neighbor, the one who had been so eager to assist. She placed it side by side with the reflection. It was a perfect match. The face in the reflection was Julian Croft. This discovery sent a shockwave through the department. Julian Croft, the quiet IT guy, the concerned neighbor, was the one who had taken the photo. He had been a background character, a helpful witness who had, in fact, bolstered the case against Mark. Now he was the center of everything. The second piece of information from the data package was just as damning. The metadata, or XIF data, embedded in the image file contained a wealth of information. It included the date and time the photo was taken, the type of camera used, a smartphone, and, most critically, the GPS coordinates of where the photo was taken. Jenkins plotted the coordinates on a map. They did not point to Clara's apartment. The GPS pin landed squarely on the apartment building across the hall. The photo of the ceramic bird, Clara's last post to the world, had been uploaded from inside Julian Croft's apartment. The timeline was suddenly horrifically clear. The post had been a fabrication, a deliberate act of deception. Julian had posted it from Clara's phone after she was already gone, perhaps after she was already dead. He had created a false timestamp to make it seem like she was alive and well in her apartment on Monday afternoon, throwing off the police's timeline of her disappearance. Detective Corbin, now a lieutenant, was brought in on the new findings. The ghost that had haunted him for 2 years suddenly had a face, and it was not the one he had expected. A new intensive investigation into Julian Croft began immediately, this time with the benefit of secrecy. They started by building a complete profile of the man who had lived in plain sight. Julian Croft had no criminal record. His colleagues described him as intelligent and reliable, but also as a loner. He rarely socialized and kept to himself. He had moved out of the Port Blossom apartment building about a year after Clara's disappearance, taking a new job in a neighboring city. Detectives placed him under surveillance. They also began a deep dive into his financial and digital history, looking for anything that connected him to Clara beyond their neighborly chats. They found that in the months leading up to her disappearance, Julian had been in significant financial trouble. He had mounting credit card debt and had recently defaulted on a personal loan. Then they found the connection they were looking for. Buried in Clara's financial records was a detail that had been overlooked in the initial investigation. 3 months before she vanished, Clara had received a small inheritance after the passing of her grandmother. It was not a life-changing sum, but it was a substantial amount, around $75,000. Clara, being a private person when it came to finances, had not widely shared this information. She had told her parents and her sister, and she had mentioned it to one other person. In an email to her helpful neighbor, Julian Croft, she had asked for advice on the best high-yield savings accounts, mentioning she had come into some money and wanted to invest it wisely. Julian had provided her with detailed advice. The email exchange was friendly and helpful on the surface. But now, with the knowledge of his own financial desperation, the conversation took on a sinister tone. He knew she had a significant amount of cash, and he knew she was not broadcasting that fact. The motive began to crystallize. It was not a crime of passion or jealousy. It was a crime of cold, calculated greed. The investigators theorized that Julian had devised a plan to rob Clara, believing she would be an easy target. But the robbery must have gone wrong. Armed with this new evidence, the photo, the metadata, and the financial motive, the Port Blossom Police Department obtained a warrant for Julian Croft's arrest and a warrant to search his current residence. They moved quickly, wanting to give him no opportunity to destroy any remaining evidence. The arrest was quiet and uneventful. Julian Croft was taken into custody at his workplace, appearing shocked and confused. He asked why he was being arrested, and when the detectives told him it was for the murder of Clara Bennett, his calm facade finally broke. For a fleeting moment, a look of pure panic flashed across his face before being replaced by a stony mask of denial. The search of his home and digital devices provided the final pieces of the puzzle. On a backup hard drive found in a storage closet, forensic specialists discovered a hidden, encrypted folder. After days of work, they managed to break the encryption. Inside were documents that laid out the entire horrific plan. Julian had been stalking Clara for months, not out of romantic obsession, but as a predator studying its prey. He had monitored her blog to understand her schedule and her habits. He knew when she was home, when she was out, and that she lived alone. He had used his IT skills to clone her apartment building's key fob, giving him unrestricted access. His search history from the weeks before the murder was a chilling chronicle of his intent. He had searched for how to disable smartphone location, best way to incapacitate someone quickly, and how to transfer funds from a locked banking app. He had methodically planned every step of the crime. The documents on the hard drive also included drafts of a confession letter written from Clara's perspective. In these drafts, he had tried to stage her disappearance as a suicide, with a note explaining she was overwhelmed and was running away to end her life. He had ultimately abandoned this idea, likely realizing it would be too difficult to make it believable. The ceramic bird had been his cleverest and cruelest deception. He had followed her to the market that weekend and watched her buy it. He knew it would be the subject of her next post. That small, beautiful object became a key component of his alibi, a tool to manipulate time itself. Confronted with the overwhelming evidence against him, the reflection in the photo, the GPS data, his financial motive, and the incriminating files on his hard drive, Julian Croft's denials crumbled. In a lengthy interrogation with Detectives Corbin and Jenkins, he confessed to everything. His story was as callous as the evidence suggested. On that Monday night, he had used his cloned key fob to let himself into Clara's apartment while she was watching television. She had been startled but not initially terrified. He was her friendly neighbor. He told her he was having trouble with his internet and asked if he could quickly check his connection using her Wi-Fi. It was a simple pretext to get inside. Once the door was closed, he attacked her. The crime was not a robbery gone wrong. It was a planned murder from the start. He knew he could not let her identify him. He had silenced her quickly and brutally, leaving no signs of a struggle in the main living area. He then spent the next several hours meticulously cleaning the apartment, removing any trace of his presence. He wrapped Clara's body in construction-grade plastic sheeting he had purchased weeks earlier. In the early hours of the morning, under the cover of darkness, he transported her body out of the building and drove to a remote, wooded area, hours outside the city. He had buried her in a deep, unmarked grave he had dug days in advance. He then took her phone, wallet, and keys with him. Later that day, from the safety of his own apartment, he had logged into her social media account. He took the ceramic bird from her apartment, staged the photo, and posted it, backdating the timestamp to make it appear as if she had posted it on Monday afternoon. It was a final, cynical act of manipulation, using her own passion against her. After the post, he had driven to a different part of the city and disposed of her phone and other belongings in a commercial dumpster. He had then used his technical skills to access her bank accounts, slowly siphoning the inheritance money over the next few months through a series of complex, anonymized digital currency transactions. His confession was delivered in a flat, emotionless monotone. He showed no remorse, no sadness for the life he had taken. His only emotion seemed to be a quiet frustration that his supposedly perfect plan had been unraveled by a single, tiny reflection in the glaze of a ceramic bird. Based on his confession, Julian Croft led investigators to the remote location where he had buried Clara. After a 2-year nightmare of uncertainty, Clara Bennett's family finally had their daughter back. They could at last lay her to rest, though the knowledge of her final moments brought a fresh and terrible wave of grief. The case against Mark Renshaw was officially and publicly closed. The Port Blossom Police Department issued a formal apology for the suspicion that had derailed his life. It was a small comfort, but it allowed him to finally clear his name. He had been a victim of circumstance, his only crime being a messy breakup and a broken heart. Paragraph's Julian Croft pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, kidnapping, and robbery to avoid a trial and a potential death sentence. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At his sentencing, Clara's mother delivered a victim impact statement. She did not speak to Julian, she spoke to her daughter. She spoke of Clara's light, her creativity, and her boundless kindness. She described the gaping hole her absence had left in their family and in the community she had so lovingly cultivated. She ended by holding up a picture of Clara, smiling, and telling the court that no act of darkness could ever truly extinguish a light that had shone so brightly. The story of Clara Bennett is a tragic reminder of the vulnerability that exists even in a life lived with openness and joy. She built a world based on trust and connection, only to be destroyed by a predator who saw those qualities not as virtues, but as weaknesses to be exploited. He was a void of empathy hiding in plain sight, a man whose greed was so profound that he could erase a human life for the price of a down payment on a new car. Her blog, Port Blossom in Bloom, remains online, frozen in time. It is now a memorial, a digital garden tended by the memories of those who loved her. The final post, the picture of the ceramic bird, is no longer just a timestamp of a crime. It is now understood as the clue that brought her killer to justice, a final, inadvertent act of a woman who, even in death, continued to bring things into the light. Her legacy is one of creativity and community, a testament to the fact that a life lived with purpose, no matter how short, can create a ripple that is never truly lost. The small, beautiful things she celebrated are what remain, a permanent record of a life that mattered. If you found this case compelling, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on similar true crime investigations. Until next time, stay aware, stay compassionate, and look out for one another.